So the first point to make is if you look at the size of the Russian economy, it's about $2.2 trillion GDP. And just the European economy is about $15 trillion GDP a year. So if the West wants to, it can easily afford to produce the money and industry to give Ukraine the tools that it needs to fight. And that's the decision everyone is confronting now. What Ukraine has is people, but right now not enough people. So there is a question mark about how Ukraine finds more people to man the front line. What the West can deliver is ammunition and equipment and money and training and also sanctions and all the other support in a confrontation with Russia. And if you want to put a figure on that, the support to Ukraine in terms of hardware is probably $60 billion a year for each of the next 5 years.
And we will be there to support you till the end and until you are victorious.
So the West is in a period of vulnerability and it needs to move faster to prepare itself to deter Russia. And if you take the case of Ukrainian soldiers, I mean, the average age in the front line is 43. So this really is a dad's army. Those soldiers are in the front line for 48 weeks a year. That's really hard, and it's winter, and they're tired. So, of course, Russia is going to keep chipping away on the front line because it wants the Ukrainian people to say we've had enough, and then they're not in that place. And Ukraine needs Russia to know it's not giving up, and it will keep chipping away. And every single day they do that, both sides will take casualties, and not a whole lot will change. If you look at the Ukrainian experience, in the age of the missile and the age of cyber, everybody's on the pitch now. So a war with Russia means you'd have to think about precision missiles hitting our capital cities, our major metropolitan centers, our power infrastructure, our food distribution centers, to break the will of people to fight, just as we've seen in Ukraine. And this takes us to this key point. A war with Russia is not a war between armed forces. It's a war between societies. And big wars are fought, won and lost by civil society. And we need to build a society that is resilient enough to think like that again, just as our forebears did in the First and Second World War.
We are in a new era, and we must be prepared to deter our enemies, to lead our allies, and defend our nation.
The war touches everybody and everything. And a war, say, between Russia and European NATO would not be about a battle that went on a front line, probably somewhere around Poland or Germany. It's a war that on a daily basis would touch life in the UK, because when you make war, you are trying above all to break the will of the civil society to keep fighting.
As an example, let's say we give all this money. We were already into Ukraine for over $200 billion. And they could make a deal with Russia in the next 3 weeks, and all of a sudden they don't want to deal with us anymore. We've given hundreds of billions of dollars. And why are we at over $200 billion? And the European nations are, if you add them up, it's a very similar sized economy. They're at $25 billion. So we're at 200 plus, and it affects them much more. We have a thing called an ocean between us, right? Affects them much more. But we're at 200, they're at 250. I did the same thing with NATO. I got them to pay up. NATO was busted until I came along. I said, everybody's going to pay. They said, well, if we don't pay, are you still going to protect us? I said, absolutely not. They couldn't believe the answer.
Well, I think for the Ukraine cause, the next sort of half year, 8 or 9 months up until November are absolutely critical. Yeah, I agree with the sentiments. Without US support, then it is a lost cause. And people in Europe need to understand that because the Russians will not stop. And quite frankly, the Americans and Trump can sit quite happily in mainland USA, you know, thousands and thousands of miles from this conflict and probably isolate themselves. So it is really, you know, it is up to us in Europe, NATO countries in Europe. You know, we are the ones under direct attack and fight. And it is but behest on us to provide Ukraine with everything it needs. The fact that they don't have enough ammunition at the moment is just ridiculous. The Danish government have agreed to empty their stocks, give them every bit of ammunition they've got to Ukraine. And quite frankly, we in the UK should be doing the same, because if we don't, we're going to be using that ammunition ourselves to fight the Russians, come the end of this year. So it is critical that we do absolutely give them all that they need. We can't rely on the Americans post November. The number one thing is stopping Putin in Ukraine. Otherwise, the terrible reality of certainly war in Europe is getting shockingly close. If Russia moves west of Ukraine, which is looking increasingly likely, so it is crucial. We have until November to make sure that Ukraine can prevail, and I think Ukraine can prevail.
Ретранслятор, антенны, передач. Вот что обнаружено. Натовский калибр. Зашли КМП украинских националистов.
Заряды на гранатомет. Морковка. Осколочная. Она пластиковая, она легкая. Хорошая ставит.